Hey everybody, let's talk about plugins for a minute. As someone with way too many plugins, I once broke Hindenburg because I had too many. I can tell you from experience that it is better to have a handful of quality plugins that I know inside and out rather than to start collecting them. It's easy to think that since plugins can make things sound better, that more plugins equals better. Let me tell you a couple stories about plugins. One coaching client came to me to look at his plugin chain because he felt his audio was sounding too processed. When we looked at his plugin chain, he was running somewhere around 10 plugins, and he couldn't tell me why half of them were there besides hoping they would help make things sound better. He'd fallen into the Waves marketing orbit and ended up with a small collection of plugins, thinking another one would help. What we ended up finding out is he had an unrealistic expectation of what was possible for the given piece of audio. He was trying to make a Zoom recording sound like it was recorded in a pro studio. So he would just heap one plugin on after another, hoping it would achieve that goal. It's also easy to dig ourselves into a hole with plugins when we don't quite understand them or how to get the most out of them. I did a coaching session with a self-taught podcaster who had built some bad habits by piecing together bits and pieces from YouTube. His process started by using gain plugins to essentially peak normalize his tracks to negative 1 dB as his first step, but he wasn't actually normalizing. He was just boosting the gain to try and reach 0.1 or negative 0.1. This led to clipping that he fixed by running 1 to 2 instances of RX's declip. Yes, he would actually run 2 sometimes because there was so much clipping. And then he would EQ, compress, and then limit that track. And then on the main output would be another declipper and another limiter. Since he didn't understand gain staging, he was creating episodes that had some audible saturation that was bordering on distortion at some points. After trying a new workflow that I'd proposed, he was surprised at how much faster and how much cleaner his audio was. The takeaway from these two stories is that plugins aren't magic bullets, and it's beneficial to understand what we're doing when we are building up our workflow. These days, I'm much more methodical in deciding to purchase a plugin. I use the same plugins every day for my client work, and this allows me to work efficiently by being able to dial them in faster. These are the things I ask myself when I'm trying out a new plugin and considering whether to buy it or not. Does it sound better than the other plugins I have? Does it do something my other plugins don't do well? Is it easier or faster for me to set up? And does it save me time? Essentially, a new plugin needs to save me time or help me create better sounding episodes for my clients for me to justify purchasing it. Ideally, it will do both. The most recent plugins I have purchased for editing have been AI powered, and they've sped up my workflow quite a bit. So let's talk about plugins. What are you using? What was your most recent purchase? What was your biggest plugin regret? Post in the comments below. And to finish my story about breaking Hindenburg, I was using Hindenburg one day and couldn't load a specific plugin. After a little back and forth with Hindenburg's tech support, it came down to installing a couple plugins. Those plugins had pushed me over the 500 plugin limit that had been implemented. Preben, the developer from Hindenburg, said he'd never anticipated someone having that many plugins, so he had to increase the limit and push out a minor update. It may seem like a lot of plugins, but over the years I had amassed a collection. The biggest culprit is Universal Audio, who installs all of their plugins, even if you don't own them. That way you can trial them, and that's about 200 plugins right there. I also owned Waves, I think it was the Horizon package, something like that. I think it's 1 or 2 steps above Platinum. I think that had another 100 or so plugins. I have Native Instruments Complete. That's another 70 or so. So these collections can add up really quickly. When I upgraded to a Mac Studio last year, I did a clean install and skipped installing the 100 or so Waves plugins I'd had for about 15 years and haven't used in about 10. I also skipped all of the free plugins I'd collected over time and never used or outgrew. So I'm down to about 300 plugins total, and most of those are for music production. If I was strictly editing podcasts, I'd probably have about 15 or 20 installed. I'll talk to you all next time.